The courtroom buzzed with that familiar Judge Judy electricity, the kind that crackles before someone gets cut off mid-sentence. Cameras hovered quietly, red lights blinking like watchful eyes, while the gallery filled with spectators who knew exactly why they were there. When Judge Judy entered, the room snapped to attention. Her presence alone commanded silence, the kind earned over decades of sharp rulings and sharper words. Jasmine Crockett stood at the podium, posture straight, hands relaxed but purposeful, her expression composed in a way that suggested preparation rather than nerves. She wasn't new to intense rooms or powerful personalities, but this was Judge Judy's courtroom, and everyone knew the rules bent in only one direction. Jasmine began speaking clearly, laying out her argument point by point. Her tone was respectful, measured, and firm without being aggressive. She cited facts, timelines, and intent, weaving them together in a way that made the situation feel less like a dispute and more like a narrative that deserved to be understood fully. A few people in the gallery nodded along. Others leaned forward, sensing something building beneath the surface. Judge Judy listened for a moment, chin lifted slightly, eyes sharp, her pen tapping lightly against the desk, tap, 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 each sound signaling dwindling patience. Then it happened. Judge Judy raised her hand abruptly. "Stop," she said, cutting through Jasmine's sentence like a blade. "I didn't ask for all that." The tapping stopped. The room froze. "You're giving me a speech," the judge continued, voice firm and unmistakably final. "Answer the question I asked, not the one you wish I'd asked." A murmur rippled through the gallery, the sound of people instinctively reacting before remembering where they were. Jasmine's mouth closed mid-thought. She lowered her gaze for a brief second, not in defeat, but in restraint. Judge Judy leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "I've heard enough," she added. "This is not a debate. This is my courtroom." Her tone carried the weight of someone used to ending conversations with a single sentence. The bailiff shifted his stance slightly, a reflex born of countless similar moments. The cameras zoomed in, catching the familiar look that usually signaled the end of someone's argument. Everyone expected Jasmine to nod, apologize, and shorten her answer to a yes or no. But Jasmine didn't move right away. She took a breath, slow, deliberate. The kind of breath people take when they decide not to react emotionally. When she looked up again, her eyes were steady, focused, and calm. No rolling of the eyes. No raised eyebrows. Just resolve. "With respect, Your Honor," she said evenly, her voice carrying without rising, "the answer requires context." The words were simple, but the effect was immediate. A few heads in the gallery snapped up. Someone near the back inhaled sharply. Judge Judy opened her mouth, clearly ready to interrupt again, but Jasmine continued before the interruption could land. "Not louder, just steadier. Because without context," she said, "the truth gets trimmed to fit the question." The sentence landed like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples spread outward. The courtroom went silent. Not the enforced silence Judge Judy usually commanded, but a natural one, born of surprise. Even the judge paused, her mouth closing as her eyes fixed on Jasmine. The pause felt long, uncomfortably long, long enough for the cameras to catch it, long enough for the audience to realize something unusual was happening. Judge Judy wasn't speaking, her pen wasn't tapping, she simply watched Jasmine, studying her the way a seasoned poker player studies an opponent who just made an unexpected move. Jasmine didn't fill the silence. She didn't rush to explain herself. She stood there, composed, hands still, her posture saying she wasn't challenging authority, she was challenging oversimplification. "I'm not going to listen to a lecture," Judge Judy finally said, but her tone had shifted. It wasn't sharper, it was slower. "This court runs on answers, not commentary." Jasmine nodded once, acknowledging the rule without retreating from her point. "Understood, Your Honor," she replied. "But an incomplete answer creates an incomplete record." Another murmur moved through the gallery, quickly stifled. The bailiff glanced toward the judge, anticipating a reaction. Judge Judy leaned back slightly in her chair, eyes narrowing again, but this time not with irritation, more like calculation. "You're very confident," she said. "Confidence doesn't change facts." Jasmine met her gaze. "No, ma'am," she said. "But clarity reveals them." The exchange felt electric, not hostile but charged, like two strong currents crossing paths. The audience could sense it. This wasn't a power struggle, it was a test. The judge exhaled through her nose, a sound familiar to anyone who'd ever watched her show. "You lawyers love context," she said dryly. "Most of the time, it's just noise." Jasmine didn't flinch. Sometimes it is, she agreed calmly. Sometimes it's the difference between assumption and understanding. The room remained utterly still. No one dared whisper. Even the camera operators seemed to move more carefully, aware they were capturing something that didn't happen often. Judge Judy stared at Jasmine for a long moment. The silence stretched again, heavier now. This was the moment people would replay later, frame by frame, wondering who blinked first. Jasmine didn't. She stood grounded, respectful, but unmoved. Finally, Judge Judy straightened in her chair. "All right," she said, voice firm but controlled. "Answer the question, briefly." The emphasis was unmistakable, a challenge, but also an opening. Jasmine nodded again, once, preparing to speak, aware that whatever came next would matter far beyond the words themselves. Jasmine didn't rush to fill the space Judge Judy had just given her. She let the silence settle, not as a tactic, but as a signal that she understood the weight of the moment. Then she spoke. "The question," she said carefully, "assumes intent without acknowledging sequence." Her voice was steady, precise, every word measured. And sequence matters, because it explains why the action occurred, not just that it did. She glanced briefly at the evidence table, then back to the judge. Without that sequence, the conclusion looks obvious. With it, the conclusion changes. Judge Judy's eyes stayed locked on her. The pen remained still. The courtroom felt suspended, as if everyone had collectively leaned forward at the same time. Jasmine continued, connecting one fact to the next, not piling them on, but aligning them so cleanly they felt unavoidable. She didn't repeat herself. She didn't editorialize. She simply clarified. When she finished, she stopped. No flourish, no final jab, just silence. 10 seconds had passed, then more. Judge Judy didn't interrupt. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, studying Jasmine with a look the audience rarely saw, curiosity edged with respect. "You're telling me," the judge said slowly, "that the question I asked skips the part that actually explains the behavior?" Jasmine nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. It compresses cause and effect into a single moment, and that's where misunderstandings start." A low ripple moved through the gallery, quickly suppressed. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. "Most people would have talked themselves into a hole by now," she said. "You didn't." Jasmine offered a small, polite smile. "I was trying not to," she replied. The exchange drew a flicker of amusement across the judge's face, brief, but unmistakable. Judge Judy turned her attention to the opposing side, who suddenly looked far less comfortable than before. "Did you hear what she said?" the judge asked sharply. "Sequence." She tapped the desk once. "You don't get to jump to the ending and call it evidence." The other party began to respond, stumbling slightly, their confidence visibly shaken. Jasmine stepped back half a pace, hands clasped loosely in front of her, watching without expression. As the opposing argument unraveled under Judge Judy's questioning, the shift in the room became undeniable. What had started as a routine silencing, a moment everyone expected to end in dismissal, had transformed into a reframing of the entire case. Judge Judy circled back to Jasmine, her tone firm but no longer dismissive. "You didn't waste my time," she said. "You used it." She paused, letting that distinction land. "There's a difference." Jasmine inclined her head. "Thank you, Your Honor." It wasn't triumph in her voice. It was acknowledgement, the kind that comes from being heard, not from winning. The judge looked down at her notes, then back up. "People think talking louder makes them right," Judge Judy said. "It doesn't. Talking clearer does." She closed the file with a decisive snap. "And clarity matters in this courtroom." The ruling followed soon after, but almost no one remembered the specifics by the time the episode ended. What lingered was the moment. The pause. The sentence that stopped a judge known for stopping everyone else. When the cameras finally cut and the gallery began to empty, people whispered not about the verdict, but about that exchange, about how control hadn't been seized, but earned. As Jasmine gathered her papers, the bailiff gave her a subtle nod. She returned it, calm as ever. Judge Judy stood to leave, then paused, looking back once more. "Counsel," she said, her voice carrying just enough to be heard. Jasmine looked up. "Don't confuse respect with silence," the judge added. "You didn't." Then she was gone. Jasmine exhaled only after the doors closed. Outside the courtroom, the noise returned, producers talking, footsteps echoing, phones buzzing with messages already spreading the clip across social media. Inside, though, the moment remained suspended in memory. Not because someone shouted, not because someone stormed out, but because, For once, the loudest thing in the room had been a calm, perfectly timed reply.